My name is Joanna Blake. I'm 33 years old. My sister punched me square in the face right in the VIP lounge of a military airport. Get out! Mia screamed. The room froze for a second, then pretended nothing happened. I didn't fight back. I wiped the blood from my lip, stood up, and pulled out my phone. Just one tap, one silent call, one slow glance across the room. No one stepped in. No one looked my way. They acted like I didn't exist. It wasn't the first time. Mia, my sister, the successful one. The family's golden girl sipped her wine like nothing had happened. I wasn't angry, not even humiliated, just weightless. 3 minutes later, the side doors opened. 4 high-ranking officers entered. No smiles, no hesitation. One of them looked at me and gave a slow, deliberate nod. I stood there in that glittering room full of polite cruelty, and no one knew what that call had just set in motion. They didn't know, but they would, because this wasn't the first time I'd been pushed aside. But it just might be the last. Walk with me, see who I've become, and what happened to the people who thought I was nothing. No one asked if I was okay. I stepped back, leaning against the wall. The lounge still echoed with soft jazz-clinking glasses and heels skimming tile. A pianist in the corner fumbled a few notes but kept playing, like the music might hold the room together. Blood still clung to the corner of my mouth. The metallic taste was familiar, too familiar. Not the first time I've tasted blood, but maybe the first time it came from someone who shares my last name. A middle-aged man brushed past me, my cousin. He wore Mia's logistics company badge on his lapel. He paused for half a second. I thought he'd say something. He didn't. Just nodded polite empty like I was staff. I didn't look away from Mia. She was still holding court telling a story, laughing lightly. Mom stood beside her, smiling. Dad was shaking hands with some contractors. Me, I was furniture, scenery. A server approached with a cold towel. I declined. He hesitated, then turned away. I checked my watch. 2 minutes and 41 seconds. The main doors opened. 4 men entered. Their uniforms weren't party attire, they weren't guests. They weren't private security. They moved like they belonged in war zones, not wine receptions. One of them, tall silver-haired face, drawn from decades of command, looked directly at me. He didn't scan the room, didn't look for a host, just looked at me. I gave a slight nod. He responded with a subtle gesture. He slid a small metal tag from his chest pocket and tucked it into his pants pocket. Only I saw it, but I understood. That was the signal. I stood straighter. Mia still hadn't noticed, but someone in her circle had. A man near her murmured something. Heads turned. The air changed, but no one understood why yet. I walked slowly toward the water table. My phone was still in my hand, the screen dark, but the line was still open. No words needed. Just presence. This moment had been in motion for 8 months. By the time I turned back around, one of the 4 had pulled out a sat phone, a single move, clean. No one noticed, but I knew the file was unlocked. The confirmation was sent. Mia finally saw me. She blinked like I was a ghost, like she couldn't believe I was still here. I didn't flinch, didn't move closer, just held her gaze across the room. She looked at me, then at the men in uniform. Something shifted in her expression. Not rage, not superiority. Fear. Then the silver-haired man walked toward the central table. A base officer who had been organizing the farewell ceremony lowered his glass mid-sip and snapped to attention. That's when the room faltered. The officer didn't need to raise his voice. He asked one question. Calm. Surgical. Loud enough for the surrounding guests to hear. Is Ms. Joanna Blake present? I didn't answer. The base officer turned and pointed. Sir, she's right there. Another officer, a woman in formal dress blues, stepped forward and stood beside me. She didn't say a word, just stood beside me. I'm not sure what expression I wore at that moment, but I know this I've never felt more grounded. Mia glanced around like someone would laugh, break the tension, say it was all a prank. No one did. I heard glass shatter somewhere. A wine flute hit the ground. The jazz had stopped. No one breathed. I didn't leave. I didn't defend myself. I didn't need to. I stood there exactly where I was always meant to be. They just never saw it until now. I used to think I was invisible because I liked it that way. I was the quiet one, the listener, the rule follower. In a family full of noise investors, entrepreneurs' constant talker silence was my small rebellion. Growing up, Mia was the sun. She burned hot and pulled everything toward her. She knew how to charm our parents, knew how to get attention with a flick of her hair and a raised voice. She won trophies, awards, praise. She also got away with everything. Me, I picked up the pieces, the broken vase, the dishes left behind, the conversations Mom and Dad didn't have time for. I didn't mind, at least not back then. We grew up in Charleston neat neighborhood matching brick houses, rules about lawn height. Our dad was a retired major who ran his household like a debriefing. You spoke when spoken to, you won, or you didn't come home. Feelings weren't acknowledged. Achievements were. Mia knew how to deliver those. I didn't. I wasn't the one with the awards. I wasn't the success story. I was just steady. In high school, I kept to myself. Studied hard, didn't date much, joined the ROTC quietly and didn't mention it at dinner. When I got accepted to West Point, I didn't even tell them until 2 days before I left. Mom blinked. Dad asked why I hadn't consulted them. Mia rolled her eyes and said, "That place isn't it mostly for guys who couldn't get into real colleges?" I packed in silence, and I left. I didn't go to prove anyone wrong. I went to learn discipline to build something of my own. I liked systems, orders, clean lines. The military gave me space and expectations I could finally understand. I didn't rise quickly, but I rose steadily. And when I was deployed the first time, no one asked where I was going. No one asked when I came back either. At first, I made excuses for them. Busy lives, different worlds. But after my third tour, something inside me changed. I stopped waiting for the family group chat to notice I was gone. Stopped checking if they'd posted about Mia's latest startup while I was out sleeping in dust and heat. I became good at vanishing, and even better at surviving. 2 years ago, I was reassigned to internal security review. Less field work, more shadows. I monitored logistics routes, contractor activity. Most of it was boring, but sometimes it wasn't. One night about 8 months ago, I recognized a pattern, a quiet inconsistency in supply chain data. Misrouted shipments, payment discrepancies, names that didn't belong. One of those names was Mia's. She had just landed a lucrative contract through her company Blake Forwarding and Logistics, a government-approved partnership praised on defense newsletters. But the back end. It didn't hold up under scrutiny. At first, I froze. I didn't want it to be her. I didn't want to be the one who saw it. But the more I looked, the more undeniable it became. And once the evidence was there, I had to make a choice. I reported it. Anonymously at first, then not so anonymously. After that, my directives changed. I wasn't just reviewing numbers. I was being reassigned to a quiet investigation. Authorized. Silent. No headlines. They moved me closer. I returned to Charleston under the guise of assisting with operations coordination. It felt surreal living just miles from my parents again, but still invisible. Mia didn't know. She still thought I was stationed out west. She sent the occasional birthday text, usually late, often misspelled. We hadn't seen each other in 2 years when she invited me to the military farewell reception. Technically, it wasn't even her idea. Her assistant sent the invite to any military contacts who might boost visibility. I was just a name in a database to her. But I accepted, because by then the investigation was almost ready. And if I'd learned anything from operating in combat zones, it was this. Sometimes proximity is the best pressure. Still, I didn't plan for the punch. I didn't expect her to snap like that, to scream in my face in front of everyone, to hit me hard enough that my jaw cracked slightly when I turned my head. But maybe I should have. She always needed to dominate a room. She always needed someone to look smaller next to her. And I've always made a convenient shadow. But what Mia didn't know, what none of them knew, is that in shadows we move quietly. And in silence we sharpen. That night, standing in that room with blood on my lip and a phone in my hand, I didn't think about revenge. I thought about protocol. The time had come. The clearance had been granted. The file had been authenticated. All I needed was the final trigger. One call, and everything would unfold exactly as planned. The days leading up to the event had been sharp. Not loud, not chaotic, just sharp. Like walking barefoot on broken glass, knowing exactly where the cuts will come from and going anyway. The military farewell ceremony was technically a networking event, a mix of logistics contractors, base personnel, and a few civilians with defense ties. Mia had rented out the VIP wing of the Charleston Military Air Terminal. Full catering, floral centerpieces, custom signage, honoring those who keep us moving. That was the banner. A tagline she probably paid someone to write. I arrived 15 minutes early. I walked through the metal detectors, greeted the staff, and slipped into the room without drawing attention. I wasn't in uniform, just a black dress regulation heels ID badge clipped to a lanyard. I saw Mia near the bar laughing with someone from the state procurement office. She didn't see me or pretended not to. I wasn't sure which was worse. I mingled for 20 minutes. Small talk, nods, observations. I had a few quiet conversations with liaison officers, most of whom didn't know who I really was. That was the point. The real mission was already in motion. The evidence had been collected, the signatures matched, the route manipulations, the backdated invoices, the shell companies all connected to Blake Forwarding and Logistics, all traceable to Mia. And yet, standing in that room, she still looked untouchable, flawless. Her smile broadcast confidence. Her laughter made people lean in. I wondered if anyone had ever told her no. I thought maybe she wouldn't acknowledge me at all. But then she turned. Our eyes met. And for a moment, I saw something flicker, confusion, disbelief. Then she smiled, cold, and walked straight toward me. Well, look who crawled out of the desert, she said, voice just loud enough for those around us to hear. You weren't on the guest list, were you? She gestured toward my lanyard. Or is that your ticket to free food? I didn't respond. Her friends chuckled. Someone handed her a glass of champagne. She took it without breaking eye contact. I always thought you'd disappear into some bunker, she said. Didn't know you were still clinging to Charleston. I let the silence stretch. Then I gave her a small nod. Nice setup. Looks expensive. She tilted her head. Don't worry, it's covered. She smiled wider. Real work pays well. You should try it sometime. That stung more than I expected. Not the insult. The implication that service wasn't real. That deployments nights in freezing tents, field hospitals, the names I carry in my head weren't real. But I didn't say that. I never do. Instead, I asked, did Dad come? She shrugged. He said he had better things to do than babysit your bitterness. Another sip. And honestly, I agreed. I felt the heat rise in my throat. I steadied my breathing. Then she leaned in. You still think you matter, she whispered. After everything, you're not a soldier anymore, Joe. You're a shadow, a name no one remembers. You're here because I let you be. And then, before I could say anything, she raised her hand. The slap didn't come. She punched me, right across the mouth, a flash of light, metal, the taste of blood. People turned. Someone gasped. A fork clattered to the ground. But no one stepped in. She stared at me, chest rising. I looked at her hand, still pressed to my lip. My phone buzzed in my hand. A silent vibration, just once. The cue, the final signal, the one that told me it's time. I turned, walked 2 steps away, dialed, held it for 3 seconds. No words. Hung up. She called after me. Oh, you're walking away now. That's what you're good at, huh? I didn't turn around. I went to the far side of the room and waited. 30 feet. That's all it took to separate 2 versions of myself. The version she thought she broke, and the one she never saw coming. She returned to her group laughing again, but it was thinner now. I could see the stiffness in her spine, the little glances she kept sending my way. She knew something had changed, but didn't know what. Not yet. Because what Mia had never learned, not in business, not in family, not in war, was that the most dangerous people never raise their voice. They don't strike back. They don't explain themselves. They just act. After the call, I slipped out of the lounge quietly. No one stopped me. No one followed. The air outside the terminal was heavy with summer heat, but it felt easier to breathe than the chilled, perfume-drenched room I'd just left behind. My lip was still bleeding. I hadn't bothered to stop it. I sat on the curb just outside the security line near the loading dock where catering trucks lined up. It smelled like diesel and lemon oil, a scent that didn't belong, but somehow anchored me. For a while, I just stared at the pavement. The adrenaline was fading, and with it came the weight, not anger, not even pain, just weight. A small part of me asked what I was doing, why I'd come, why I'd stayed silent for so long, why I thought any of it the years of service, the quiet investigation, the slow gathering of evidence would matter to people who'd never seen me as more than a ghost in the room. Maybe Mia was right. Maybe I didn't matter. Not to them, not anymore. That thought cracked something in me I didn't want to admit was still there, the old hunger. To be seen. To be enough. I hated that it still lived inside me. It would have been easier to walk away completely, to vanish again. No more Charleston. No more family names or shared bloodlines. Let them choke on their own arrogance and let it have nothing to do with me. But that's not how the military trains you. You finish what you start. You don't burn the ground unless it's mission critical. I didn't know if I wanted to stay. I didn't know if I could keep carrying this. And then, as if someone sensed it, my phone buzzed. A message. Simple. Just 4 words need your eyes. Urgent. It was from Rayner. Colonel Richard Rayner. My former commanding officer, now a regional intelligence advisor for the Southeast Corridor. I hadn't heard from him directly in months. He was the only person in my previous chain of command who had ever said out loud, "You're the best we've had in 5 years." He never gave compliments. He didn't believe in them, but he believed in me. I stared at the message. It had been sent 10 minutes ago during the reception. He knew I was here. He knew what just happened. And he still wanted my eyes. I felt my spine straighten before I realized I'd moved. I stood up, walked across the lot, entered a side door near the admin wing, found a restroom, locked the door. I took a long look at myself in the mirror. The blood had dried at the corner of my mouth. My hair was a mess. There was a small bruise blooming along my jaw. I didn't flinch. I didn't fix it. I took out my tablet from my bag and pulled up the secure drive. Input my access key, face scan, confirmation. The files were there. Every shipment, every signature, every invoice that had been doctored under Mia's authority. The evidence wasn't just enough, it was overwhelming. And suddenly I felt cold, not from fear, but clarity. They weren't just ignoring me. They were standing on something I built and laughing as they kicked dirt over it. For months I had treated this like a quiet review. A process, a job. But now I saw it for what it really was, a theft of trust, of government funding, of lives because faulty logistics don't just delay supplies. They cost people their limbs, their breath, their chance to come home. I placed the tablet back into my bag and straightened my shoulders. I opened the secure chat and typed back, "Send coordinates." I'm ready. No fanfare, no vindication, just the next step. The low point wasn't in the punch. It wasn't even in the silence after. It was in the moment I believed them, even for a second, when I almost forgot who I am. The coordinates led me to a storage facility tucked behind an unmarked supply depot on the edge of the base. You wouldn't know it was there unless you'd been there before or had clearance. I had both. Rayner met me just past midnight. No uniform, no handshake. Just a subtle nod and a hand gesture that told me where to follow. We didn't talk until we were inside behind a reinforced steel door flanked by motion sensors and biometric locks, the kind of place used for sensitive asset transfers and short-term classified containment. He handed me a thermal printout, already highlighted, already time-stamped. "They're cleaning house," he said. The file showed the immediate closure of several secondary routing stations, all tied to the Blake forwarding contracts. The closures weren't ordered by procurement. They were self-initiated. Someone inside the company was trying to erase their trail. Mia knew, or someone close to her did. "They're scared," I said, scanning the logs. He nodded. "They should be." I spent the next 4 hours inside that bunker updating and finalizing the chain of evidence documents, the financial discrepancies, the route manipulation, the internal messages captured through contractor backdoor leaks, all of it now matched across 3 independent systems. And I was the lead investigator on record. That was the thing about being underestimated. They never saw you coming until the report was already on the desk of someone who could dismantle them. At 4:32 a.m., I submitted the final case file. The message went directly to the Department of Defense's Internal Investigative Division encrypted under Tier 1 security. At 4:34 a.m., I received one word back received. I didn't go home. I showered at the facility, changed into a fresh set of clothes, and went straight to Command East HQ, the Charleston branch of Joint Logistics Command, and requested an audience with the Deputy Regional Director. I didn't ask. I presented my badge. Then I used the name I rarely used. Commander Joanna Blake, Tasked Internal Clearance Officer, SCGA Corridor. There was a pause, a phone call, a second check. Then I was escorted upstairs. The deputy, a stern woman named Galloway, was waiting, arms folded, eyes sharp. She didn't offer me a seat, but she didn't dismiss me either. I handed her the tablet. I recommend full audit lockdown, effective immediately. She tapped through the files in silence. Then she looked up. This touches people who sit in Washington. I know. You have family in this. I also have command clearance. And a signed authorization from Colonel Rayner. Her eyes flickered. I didn't blink. She finally nodded and opened a direct channel. By 6:10 a.m., the lockdown was issued. Contract suspensions, account freezes, on-site audits, all under the radar for now. That's the difference between power and noise. Mia had the latter. I had the former. I left the building without speaking to anyone else. No press, no headlines, just the silent machinery of justice beginning to move. By noon, I was back at my apartment, curtains drawn, coffee reheated. I watched the news cycle churn quietly, not yet catching the storm they were about to walk into. A few articles popped up, nothing major. Routine audit at a logistics company. Compliance review for newly awarded defense contracts. The big wave would come later. For now, the silence was mine to keep. Around 3 p.m., I got another message. Not from Rayner, not from Galloway, from someone I hadn't expected. Captain Elsie Cho, Logistics Airborne Unit West Command. We'd served together years ago, just one mission. But she had remembered me. Her message was simple. Didn't think they'd let you back in. Good to see someone still playing the long game. Attached was a photo of me 4 years ago leading a convoy through enemy terrain after our commanding officer had been incapacitated. It had never made the news, but someone had kept it. I stared at the image longer than I thought I would. It wasn't ego. It was reminder of what was real, of who I was before they tried to shrink me down. They had forgotten. I never had. That night, I updated my records, requested a transfer to Internal Intelligence West. I didn't want to stay in Charleston, not after this. But I wasn't running, I was repositioning. At 2:46 a.m., the transfer was approved, with rank reinstatement. Commander, full clearance. They never said the words out loud. No parade, no promotion ceremony, just a quiet confirmation that I had done my job and done it better than anyone expected. They thought I was gone, but I wasn't. I was silent, which isn't the same. The next morning, I returned to the same lounge. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. The event had spilled over into a second day, this time rebranded as a logistics innovation briefing to impress a few last-minute congressional aides who'd flown in overnight. Mia was still hosting, still smiling, still pretending nothing had happened. I wore the same black dress, no makeup to hide the bruise blooming along my jaw. No badge this time. No need. When I walked through the doors, no one stopped me. Security had already been briefed. Inside, the energy was different, tighter, stiff. Whispers passed between tables like static. Someone glanced at me and turned away quickly. A few stared longer, uncertain if I was the same woman from the night before, the one who got punched and didn't fight back. I was, but also not. I walked to the far end of the room and stood near the window. Didn't engage. Didn't assert. just existed more visibly than I ever had. Mia saw me 15 minutes later. She was in the middle of a photo op, flanked by 2 representatives and the base public affairs officer. Her smile cracked for just a second. A fracture, but she recovered. She didn't come over, didn't look at me again, but I could feel her unraveling beneath the surface. The way her laugh got tighter, the way her fingers clenched harder around her glass. Then, just before noon, it happened. A group of 5 uniformed officers entered, led by Colonel Rayner. He wasn't wearing medals. He didn't need to. Every movement was purposeful. Every step sharpened the silence in the room. People stood, not out of ceremony, out of instinct. Mia's voice faltered mid-sentence as she turned toward them. Rayner didn't speak to her, didn't speak to anyone else. He walked past the center display table, the one with the giant banner bearing Mia's company logo, and headed straight for me. He stopped a foot away, straightened. Then, in a voice meant to be heard but not shouted, he said, "Commander Blake, welcome back." That was all. But the air shifted, as if someone had cut the room's oxygen in half. 3 officers behind him followed his lead. Nods, acknowledgement. Respect not out of obligation but recognition. I returned the nod. "Sir." It was the first word I'd spoken all day. Gasps rippled. A woman dropped her phone. Somewhere a camera shutter clicked, then stopped. Mia didn't move. She looked frozen, like she'd seen something that broke her understanding of gravity. Colonel Rayner didn't even glance at her. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and handed me a slim folder. Unmarked. No ceremony. I tucked it under my arm without opening it. Didn't need to. I knew what was inside. Then he turned to the gathered room, silent now, and said calmly, "Pair standing orders will be proceeding with the oversight debrief at 1300 hours. Security clearance will be strictly enforced. Commander Blake is lead contact. That's all." He walked away, just like that. But it wasn't just a moment. It was a reckoning. Mia finally took a step toward me. Her heels clacked like hammers on glass. Her face struggled between a smile and panic. She didn't speak, not yet. I turned before she reached me, walked slowly not away but through. Through the room she once ruled, through the field of whispered judgments and pretend alliances. They parted for me this time. No one dared block my path. No one laughed. No one asked who I was, because now they knew, and they had known all along, they just hadn't looked close enough. That was the moment I realized something power doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly. And when it does, it doesn't need to explain. I didn't open the folder until I was alone. Later that afternoon, I sat in an unmarked vehicle parked 2 blocks from the command center. The heat outside baked the windshield. Inside, it was still and dark. I flipped the cover open slowly. Inside, a single-page memo stamped with a red seal. Commander Joanna Blake. Assigned Oversight Authority Logistics Audit, Priority Level 3. Subject Blake Forwarding and Logistics. It was official, and it was public. Below the memo sat 3 attachments, each one a final certified report. My investigation had passed internal review. The data had been verified by a separate task force. There was no more anonymity. Every line bore my name. Every chart. Every signature. Every detail that traced stolen funding, falsified delivery logs, contractor bribes, and misrouted equipment. Each file opened like a page in a story I knew by heart. But this time, it wasn't just mine. Now, everyone could read it. At 3:16 p.m., the Office of Procurement Compliance released a redacted version of the report to a controlled distribution list congressional defense liaisons, contracting officers' military oversight divisions. The subject line was simple findings, LFL 4817. That was the internal code name for Mia's company, Blake Forwarding and Logistics. By 4 p.m., 3 contracts had been frozen. By 4:15, news agencies were calling it a routine inquiry. By 5:00, someone had leaked a portion of the report to a journalist with clearance. And by 6:12, my name was trending in the Defense Network back channels. Not for scandal, for integrity. I didn't post. I didn't comment. I didn't gloat. I just sat in that car and breathed. Because the truth didn't need to be weaponized. It just needed to be released. Mia didn't call me. But I heard from her indirectly through a terse statement released by her firm. Blake Forwarding and Logistics is fully cooperating with government officials and maintains the highest commitment to transparency. It was the language of people who've already been caught. What the press didn't know, what only a few inside that room at the VIP lounge knew, was that I hadn't set her up. I'd warned her. Every silence, every absence, every unread message. It was a kind of mercy. She just mistook it for weakness, and she wasn't alone. The following day, I received a letter, real paper, real ink. It was from Colonel Rayner. There were only 2 sentences written on it. You could have gone louder. You didn't. That's what made it permanent. There was no dramatic family fallout, no teary phone calls, no apologies, just silence. Not the kind that hurts, the kind that confirms. Dad never said a word. He knew what had happened, I'm sure of it. But his silence this time didn't sting. It felt small, like his voice had finally shrunk to the size of its own limits. Mom sent a text. It said, "We didn't know." That was it. I didn't reply. Not out of cruelty. Just clarity. I finally understood they hadn't seen me because they'd chosen not to, and now I was too far ahead for them to catch up. That weekend, I sat on the back porch of my temporary housing mug of tea in hand-boots-off uniform folded neatly beside me. Across from me sat Captain Elsie Cho. She'd driven in from Atlanta. She said she just wanted to see it with her own eyes. We talked for an hour. Not about Mia, not about logistics, about leadership, and about what it feels like to be invisible until you aren't. Before she left, she handed me a small patch. Dark gray stitching on black. It read, "Quiet execution, permanent impact." Unofficial, of course, but earned. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spin slowly overhead. I thought about everything that had unfolded, not like a firestorm, but like frost creeping across glass. Beautiful. Inevitable. The truth had never needed me to shout. It just needed me to endure. I didn't go to Mia's hearing. There wasn't a trial, not in the dramatic sense. Just a long series of closed-door debriefings, audits, interviews, and contract voids. Her company lost its government certifications. Multiple partners pulled out within a week. A few civil penalties were issued. A quiet, thorough dismantling. No headlines, no spectacle. Just the quiet sound of a machine shutting down. I wasn't the only reason it happened, but I was the reason it began. I kept working. My transfer to Internal Intelligence West came through without friction. I moved into a modest quarters near the San Diego base, concrete walls, clean lines, ocean wind at night. The kind of place that doesn't need to prove anything to be strong. I now lead a team of 4, all quiet thinkers. No one calls attention to themselves, but I've read their files. They've walked through fire just like I have. Some carry deeper wounds. None of them brag. We don't talk much, but we get things done. Some days my name comes up on briefings, not with fanfare, but with quiet recognition. That's Blake's unit. She handled the Charleston fallout. I never correct them. I never explain what really happened. I just nod. Move forward. One evening, about 6 weeks later, I received a letter. No return address. Neat handwriting. Inside a photo. It was of me, standing in the VIP lounge the moment Rayner addressed me. A press photographer had captured it somehow without anyone realizing. I'm in the center of the frame, standing still. My hands are relaxed. The folder is tucked beneath my arm. My jaw is bruised. And yet, I look taller than I remember feeling. On the back of the photo in pencil were just 3 words. You didn't flinch. I never found out who sent it. I never needed to. Mia moved out of Charleston, sold the house. Started something new out west, I heard. She hasn't reached out. Part of me thought she might. A letter, an apology, a question. But silence can be its own answer. It's easy to imagine she hates me now. But maybe she doesn't. Maybe she finally sees me for who I've always been and just doesn't know what to do with that. I'm not angry. I'm free. There was a time I wanted my family to say it. You were right. You mattered. We should have seen you. But I don't need that anymore. What I built didn't need their permission. What I protected didn't require their praise. The system works best when it's filled with people who don't need the spotlight to stay upright. That's where I live now, in the spaces between the noise, in the slow turning gears. That's where the real power is. Last week, a junior analyst in my division asked how I got here. I looked at her for a long time. Then I smiled and said, "Someone tried to erase me. So I rebuilt myself where they couldn't reach." She didn't ask again, but I could tell she understood. People still ask if I ever miss Charleston, if I miss my family, if I regret how it all ended. But here's the truth. It didn't end. It transformed. I'm still me. Just fully now. Without bending, without waiting for permission, without asking to be seen. They told me once that if I didn't take up space, I'd be forgotten. But I learned something better. You don't have to take up space to build something that stands forever. You just have to hold your ground. Quietly. Precisely. Completely. And when they don't give you a seat in the room, you build the command center.